Well, hello and welcome to Aim for More, a podcast where we talk about restoring your God-given identity and renewing your God-given purpose through authenticity, insight, and mindfulness. I am your host, Dr. Karen Vanderhoff, and welcome to our new adventure. Well, today we are starting a short series on brain health. One of the things I've become increasingly convinced of over the years is that we've unintentionally separated conversations that were never meant to be separated at all. We talk about mental health, and we talk about our physical health, and we talk about our spiritual health, but in real life, they constantly influence one another. And as a psychologist, I spend my days talking with people about anxiety and depression, relationships, trauma, identity, their thought patterns, communication, behavior. And those conversations matter deeply, but so many of my clients feel stuck. They're important conversations. They're conversations I'll continue to have every single day. But the longer I practice, the more convinced I become that there's another conversation that needs to be had to help people not be stuck any longer. We need to talk about the brain, because every thought you think, every emotion that you experience, every decision you make, every relationship you build, every temptation you resist, every habit you form, every prayer you pray, every step you take towards becoming the person that God created you to be happens through one incredible organ that God created, your brain. And the brain isn't just another organ, it's the organ through which we live out our calling. It's the organ that allows us to love others and make decisions and pursue purpose, the purpose that God's given us. And yet, I think one of the greatest mistakes we've made is that we become very good at talking about thoughts and feelings and behaviors while forgetting that there's an actual organ producing those experiences. We spend so much time, a tremendous amount of time, talking about mental health. We simply don't spend enough time talking about brain health. And those two conversations are just really closely connected. They're not the same. Mental health focuses on our thoughts and our emotions, our behaviors, relationships, coping skills. Brain health asks a different question altogether. My question for you is, how healthy is the organ that's producing those thoughts, emotions, and behaviors? Now, before I'm misunderstood, let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying everything's biological. I'm definitely not saying therapy doesn't work. I'm not saying medication's always the answer. Quite the opposite. Actually, I'm not a huge fan of medication most of the time. It has its place, but in our society, I would argue it's way overused. As a psychologist, I deeply believe in counseling. I deeply believe in understanding our emotions and our thoughts and our relationships and our behaviors. Those things matter tremendously. I'm simply suggesting that we've been unintentional in separating out mental health from the organ that makes mental health possible. And when we care for both, I think we actually give ourselves the greatest opportunity to heal, grow, and thrive. And I'm suggesting that when we don't consider brain health, that's often when we end up stuck. Now, I'll be honest, when I became a psychologist, I never could have imagined how much time I would spend talking about nutrition and sleep and exercise and physical health. I certainly don't believe I'm an expert in those things, but I've had to get up to speed quickly. In fact, it's really, really ironic how often I'm tasked with talking to somebody about their sleep health or about their nutrition or about their physical body. Because the truth is, I've struggled with weight and health most of my life. If you had asked me 20 years ago whether I'd be encouraging clients to eat more protein or get better sleep or exercise regularly, take care of their bodies, I probably would have laughed at you because I don't typically talk to people about things that I'm not doing well myself. But the truth is, we can't have emotional health or even spiritual health if we ignore our physical health. I learned this firsthand when I went through my own health crisis about 2.5 years ago. Now, hindsight being 2020, my health had actually been struggling for even years before that. And I had actually told several doctors that I was concerned. I couldn't get anybody to take me seriously. It was incredibly frustrating. I was gaining weight with no particular explanation for why, and most providers I met with simply said I needed more willpower. They said I needed to eat less and exercise more. Thanks. That's incredibly helpful. Note my sarcasm because it wasn't helpful at all. In fact, it was really, really shaming. Some said it was just my age. Many said it was my hormones. One provider offered me a GLP-1. Another one offered me a prescription for metformin that I would then end up being on for the rest of my life. And those treatment options were all offered without doing anything diagnostically to identify what was actually going on. January 1st of 2024, I became nauseous. And a week later, the symptoms hadn't let up. I reached out to a doctor that had been recommended to me actually by a client, hoping that maybe I would get a different experience than I'd had in the past. And that started me on a 6-month journey of GI issues. Thankfully, this provider ordered labs to try to understand what was happening. Unfortunately, those labs were largely negative. It was a good thing, but I still didn't have any answers. Eventually, that provider sent me to a specialist who never asked about my diet, despite there being an issue with the system that actually digests our food. That provider prescribed acid reducers without really knowing what was going on and without actually knowing if acid was the problem. And turns out that prescription actually made the problem worse. I had an endoscopy in July. It was negative. And finally, my new physician, who's my physician to this day, who never gave up on discovering the actual root cause, ordered an ultrasound and a CT scan, which revealed, thankfully, that all I was dealing with was a sluggish gallbladder with some gallstones. Thankfully, the issue was nothing life-threatening, even though there were times it sure felt like it. We at times even considered if I was actually dealing with a cancer. The unknown was much more challenging, honestly, than I ever imagined it would be. And during that time when I was sick, the term brain fog became incredibly real to me because I couldn't remember the name of my best friend's son, which was terrifying for someone who makes a living with my thinking, with my remembering, with solving problems. I now had a new appreciation for what my patients told me they'd gone through when they experienced brain fog. I had to wrestle with my own behaviors that had contributed to the health problem. I had to change how I ate, and I had to change how I ate dramatically. Largely because my desire was to save my gallbladder and not to have it removed. So my doctor told me I needed to cut sugar, and I needed to cut grain, and I needed to cut alcohol. I already don't drink, so I asked him if we could do 2 out of 3. I was going to be leaving for vacation the very next day. And I was so sick that we were wondering if I should even go. And he said, no, you need to go and you can do whatever you want to do. You can eat whatever you want to eat. But if you don't cut out sugar, alcohol, and grain, you will likely end up in the hospital while you're on vacation. I didn't want that. I was so sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. There was 1 week during this time I lost 7 pounds. I would not recommend this as a weight loss program. I was so unable to eat and so weak from not having enough calories that I would sleep on the couch behind me in between my clients. This sluggish gallbladder had been a pain in the behind for so long. I was so desperate that I would do anything. And yet, I cried on the way home because I really love food. And all I could think about was all the food I wasn't going to get to eat on vacation. My friend who went on that trip with me, we had just been to Costco and we had bought all the travel snacks. And we were going to go to 4 different major league ballparks in 7 days. My doctor's recommendation to me now meant no hot dog, no cold Coke, no nachos, no pretzel, no ice cream. And I was grieving. I was grieving the loss of all of those things. But my friend was a lifesaver. I called her on the way home and I said, well, here's what the doctor said. The good news is I get to go. The bad news is I don't know what I'm going to eat. And she said, we will figure it out. So I want you to meet me at the grocery store. And so I did. And we bought all the things I could have, and we got rid of the things I couldn't. That's what good friends do. So that's what we did. We spent that week focusing on what I could have instead of on what I couldn't. And something wild happened. I got well. And not just my gut. When I began to eat a brain healthy diet, my overall health improved dramatically. I had energy. I could think more clearly. My sleep improved. And I felt like myself again. In fact, I realized that I don't know that I had ever felt that good before. When I realized that cutting sugar and carbs wasn't a punishment, but a way to care for my body, the body God gave me, eating that way became much more sustainable instead of just a short-term white-knuckle diet. Now, this isn't easy. I struggle with this to this day. I still meet with that same doctor. He's a dear friend now. And we have conversations regularly about how eating healthy isn't a punishment for poor self-control or not having enough willpower, but it's a beautiful way to care for yourself because we all deserve to pursue health and feel good. One of the first things we need to do is actually define what we're talking about, because people will often use mental health and brain health as though they mean the same thing. And I don't think they do. As I've alluded to, they're closely related, but they're really different. Mental health is primarily concerned with our psychological and emotional functioning. It includes things like our thoughts and our behaviors, how we cope with stress, our emotions, how we relate to other people, how we regulate our emotions. We think about things like depression, anxiety, grief, having gone through a trauma, having marital conflict, our personality. How resilient are we? I could go on. This is the world that psychologists like myself and counselors spend almost all of their time on and all of their time discussing. We ask questions like, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? What's happened? What does the situation mean for you? How are you coping? And those are really good questions. And they're questions I ask almost every day. But brain health asks a different set of questions. Brain health says, how healthy is the organ itself? So am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting adequate nutrition? What's blood flow like? Has there been a concussion? Could inflammation be affecting my functioning? What roles could hormones play? Could alcohol or other substances be influencing my mood or my judgment? Could chronic illness be affecting my cognition? And that set of questions is completely different. They're both necessary. Mental health asks, what are you experiencing? Brain health says what might be contributing to that experience. And they're not competing questions. They're actually very complementary. So I've had to get really good at talking to people about their physical health and especially their brain. I want to be really careful here because I don't want anyone to hear something I'm not saying. I'm not saying depression or anxiety is just a brain problem or just biological. I'm certainly not saying counseling doesn't work. Obviously, I believe in counseling. I devoted my entire career to becoming a psychologist. Again, this isn't an either-or conversation. It's a both-and conversation. Therapy matters. Sometimes medication is needed. Relationships matter. If you've been around here at all, you know how important faith is to me. So faith matters, but the brain matters too. And I simply think we sometimes overlook that piece. One of my heroes in this space is Dr. Daniel Amen, so much so that I took the time to become a certified brain health coach with his program, his clinics. And one of the things he points out, and I take his word for it because he's a double board certified psychiatrist, is that we are still approaching mental health problems in the same way we did when Mary Todd Lincoln was diagnosed with madness and Abraham Lincoln was diagnosed with melancholy. Our diagnoses are more sophisticated, but the way we approach the problems really hasn't changed. We take the set of symptoms and we try to find ways to ease those symptoms instead of considering what's causing those symptoms in the first place. We make diagnoses off of a set of symptoms instead of actually looking for the root cause. Imagine if cardiologists did that. If I walked into a cardiologist's office and complained of chest pain and they just prescribed a surgery, prescribed a medication, and never actually looked at my heart. We would never do that. It's actually what I experienced with my GI issues. It took over 6 months before anybody actually looked to see what was going on. Until then, honestly, we were just guessing based off the symptoms I was describing. That's not good practice. And that's really why I became so interested in brain health in the first place. Not because I stopped believing in psychology, but because I realized psychology alone isn't answering every question. And Dr. Daniel Amen agrees. I was introduced to him at a conference I attend regularly. I immediately admired his commitment to really pursuing the true cause behind the symptoms, including daring to take images of the brain. It's really personal for him. He had a nephew who had a really dramatic shift in behavior and was misdiagnosed. And brain imaging is what led to an accurate diagnosis and saved his nephew's life. So he's committed his life to utilizing what's called SPECT scans to look at over 100,000 brains at this point. And that allows his treatment recommendations to be much more targeted and much more effective. Why do we dare to image every organ except the brain? Why don't we take scans of every individual who has symptoms indicating brain health problems? Well, unfortunately, it just isn't part of psychiatry's traditional training. So most psychiatrists don't really know how to read them, or more importantly, what to do with the information. Now, I should maybe clarify terms a little bit because this gets confusing. I'm a psychologist. That's somebody who has a PhD. So I cannot prescribe medication. My specialty is in therapy, talk therapy, and psychological assessment. Psychologists is what I am. Psychiatrists have a medical degree, and their specialty is in the treatment of mental health disorders from a medical perspective. So using medications and sometimes things like ECT and other treatment modalities like that. So most psychiatrists have not been trained to think that the brain problem is going to be solved by looking at the brain with an image, which I know seems wild, but it's the way the training goes. They've been trained to think the brain problem must be blatantly obvious before they even order a scan of any kind. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of myths and misconceptions about imaging. And then there's always politics, unfortunately, and political bodies tend to drag their feet and end up holding up the field when it comes to things like insurance and the use of new technology. So insurance plans will not cover this kind of imaging, so it's not really very easily accessible to the general public. Dr. Amen and his clinics, he's got 5 of them around the country, have done their very best to make it accessible. It costs between $3,000 and $5,000 to go have your brain scanned. It is such a worthwhile tool that I actually plan on having my own brain scanned as a birthday present to myself in the future. My husband offered to take me to Hawaii for my 50th birthday in a few years. And instead, I told him I want to go to Chicago and have our brains scanned. It matters that much to me. Because what if an emotional problem isn't just emotional, but actually physical? What if there's brain inflammation? What if there's a previous head trauma? What if there's toxicity? What if there's an infection? There's no one size fits all approach because most problems are not single issues or simple disorders, including things like obesity, by the way. Solving that problem isn't usually as simple as having more willpower to avoid the Twinkies and getting up earlier to hit the gym. At least that wasn't my story at all. Unfortunately, many of our medications fall short in delivering on their stated promises for relief. Antidepressants, for example, actually don't perform any better than placebo for everyone except the most severely depressed people. I know that's probably disappointing to hear because there's probably a lot of you listening who are on an antidepressant. I used to take one too. But the stats are the stats. The research is the research. Things like infection, toxicity, brain injury are really, really difficult to identify and really, really easy to miss altogether. And even when I suspect that a brain injury might be the cause of the problems that the person's experiencing, it's really hard to know then what to do about it. But brain health is the center of overall health and success. We have research on research on research that shows the correlation between brain health and different measures of success. The truth is, when your brain functions well, your life generally becomes easier. And when your brain functioning suffers, everything else becomes harder too. So here's the truth about our brains. They are incredibly complicated. They're made up of 100 billion neurons and trillions of supporting cells. It's wild. There are more brain connections than there are stars in the universe. That's even crazier to consider. Our brain comprises just 2% of our body weight, but uses between 20 and 30% of the calories that we consume and 20% of the oxygen and blood flow in our bodies. The truth is, your behavior either accelerates your brain aging or decelerates it. And symptoms of poor health often don't reveal themselves immediately. Dr. Amen says that most people who experience a dementia later in their life had signs and symptoms 10 years previous to it actually being diagnosed. The problem is often there for years before the symptoms actually become noticeable enough to diagnose. It's sad. And we often ignore the symptoms that do reveal themselves because we've accepted them as being a normal part of aging, such as minor memory loss or low energy or irritability, short attention span, brain fog, insomnia, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, weight issues. Just like I was told, you're just getting older. Brain-related problems, unfortunately, affect 200 million Americans at some point in their lives. Alzheimer's is expected to triple in the next 30 years, and there's no great cure on the horizon. Research shows that as our weight goes up, our brain size actually goes down. And as our brain size goes down, so does its functioning. And unfortunately, 67% of Americans are overweight and 37% are obese. We're starting to believe that Alzheimer's might actually be type 3 diabetes. So the reality is, we don't take great care of our brains. Our brain is very soft. If you've heard that it's like Jell-O, I've heard that's actually more like soft butter. And it's held in a skull that is very hard and has a lot of sharp ridges on the inside, which means the brain was not meant for hits to the head. I'm going to ask God about this someday. I don't question his design for our body because I believe God knows what he's doing, but I got to admit, this doesn't seem smart. Soft butter inside of a hard, sharp, ridgy skull. And even though our brain was never meant to withstand blows to the head, we cheer on young men who smash into one another over a football. Brain trauma is linked to increased substance abuse, homelessness, dementia, depression, learning problems, and suicide. Dr. Amen has done a lot of work with juveniles and other violent offenders that are currently in jail, and almost all of them have had some sort of brain trauma. Traumatic brain injuries often affect the front part of our brains, which is responsible for things like focus and forethought and impulse control and organization, planning, judgment, empathy, insight, and how about this one, learning from previous mistakes. So many things can hurt our brains, including substance use, inactivity, insomnia, environmental toxins, poor hormone levels, and unfortunately, yes, obesity and poor diet. Honestly, even having a negative peer group can decrease our overall brain health. This probably feels really overwhelming. If I'm you right now, I'm like, this feels hopeless, right? But there are so many things we can do to push back against all the things that hurt our brain. We are never stuck. We are never stuck with the brain we currently have. We can begin to go after the brain we want. Brain envy, or desiring the most beautiful, healthy brain you can imagine, is a really powerful motivator, and it will push us, hopefully, to make brain healthy decisions. So what do? Instead of asking what's wrong with me, we start asking, what does my brain need to be healthy? Not because every problem is strictly biological, not because counseling isn't important or helpful, not because prayer or religious practices aren't important, they all are, but because that question shifts my posture from one of shame to one of stewardship. God gave you and me one brain, and caring for it isn't vanity, caring for it is wisdom. Stewardship is simply understanding what's been entrusted to me and entrusted to you and faithfully caring for it. It's understanding that what has been given to me has to be nurtured and protected as a sweet gift. In some ways, stewardship is about returning the item you've borrowed from a neighbor in better shape than when it was loaned to you in the first place. God gave you one brain, not simply so you could live longer, but so you could faithfully become the person He created you to be. And it often starts by asking, why do I want to be healthy? Why do I want a great brain? My answer started with simply wanting to be well again. I was tired of being tired. I was tired of the nausea. I was tired of the brain fog. I was tired of my clothes not fitting. I was tired of not feeling good about myself. That's where it started. Now I want a great brain so I can travel with my husband and have energy to try new things and go new places. Now I want a great brain because I want to be able to run and chase future grandchildren. Now I want a great brain so I can avoid doctor's offices and doctor's bills. I want to prevent Alzheimer's, but I really want a healthy brain because I want to continue doing the work God's called me to do. I want to think clearly. I want to love people well. I want to make wise decisions. I want to continue learning. I want to enjoy the people I love. I want to remember the moments that matter. I want to become the person God created me to be, and having a healthy brain makes all of that much more likely. Now listen, that doesn't mean life's going to be perfect. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Jesus promises we'll have trouble in this world. But having a healthy brain does position you in a better place to handle life's challenges when they come, and they always come. Now, why do you want a healthy brain? What's your why? One of the most powerful exercises I learned from Dr. Amen is the one-page miracle, because before you decide how to change your life, you have to know why you want to change your life. So on a piece of paper, write down these questions and answer them as brutally honestly as you can. Here's the first one. What do I want? No, really, what do you really, really want? And explore the specific areas in your life. So top question, what do I want? What do I really want? Second question, what do I want in my relationships? My friendships, my spouse, my coworkers. What do I want my relationships to feel like, to look like? The next area, what do I want at work? Do I want fulfillment? Do I want to make more money? Do I enjoy the environment that's there? What do I want financially? Do you know brain health and financial success are correlated? Now, correlation is not causation, but still they're correlated. So am I spending my money wisely, or am I being impulsive? Do I need to make more money? Do I need to give more money away? Do I need to save more money? What do I want for myself? Have I ignored pursuing a hobby or an interest that I love? So, the one page miracle, what do I want? What do I really want underneath that? What do I want in my relationships? What do I want in my career? What do I want financially? What do I want for myself? And then the last question, is my current behavior helping me get what I want? And this one page miracle becomes the filter through which every decision is made. When there's a donut sitting in front of you, is eating that donut worth it? Is eating that donut going to help you get the things you just wrote down? Karen, it's no big deal. It's just a donut. It's also just your brain health. And that donut doesn't take you towards a better brain. I would argue it's not worth it. Now, if you don't know why you want a healthy brain, you're eventually going to quit making brain healthy choices. And if your why isn't big enough, you'll justify anything and you'll see brain healthy decisions as punishment instead of privilege. Before you decide what you need to change, you have to know who you're trying to become and why you're trying to become that. Because being healthy is hard. Change is uncomfortable. Change requires discomfort before it ever produces growth, and healthy choices are often really inconvenient. They sometimes cost you time. They often cost you more money. They require discipline. They require saying no to immediate gratification. They might even require you to be different or weird from those around you. And if your why isn't compelling enough, your new habits won't stick. So once you clarify your why, then you're able to make decisions instead of choices. Because choices are temporary, they're immediate. Decisions are actually thought out and lasting. A choice is, I wonder what kind of salad dressing I want with my salad for lunch. I think I'll pick ranch. A decision is, I get up early and I work out every morning. That decision then eliminates the need for a choice because I've already pre-decided what I'm going to do. So when the alarm goes off and I don't feel like getting up, it's not a choice because I've already made a decision. Your why has to be big enough. Having a clear why connected to clear decisions also allows you to take a bad day and turn it into good data instead of seeing a bad day as a personal failure, because that will lead to just giving up completely. Your brain is one of God's greatest gifts. It influences every thought you think, every emotion you experience, every decision you make, every relationship you build, every purpose that you pursue. Caring for it isn't selfish. Caring for it isn't vanity. It's stewardship. Every healthy decision you make today is an investment in the person you're becoming tomorrow. I hope you get to meet my physician someday. He's a hero of mine now. I invited him to my wedding, and when we were discussing it and discussing my new diet and how hard it was for me to give up some of the things I love, including sugar, he said to me, Karen, are you going to serve cake at your wedding? And I said, I sure am. He said, why? I had never thought about it before. And I said, I guess I don't know. It's tradition. He goes, we are celebrating the sweet union between you and Dave. It is reason to celebrate. What good is celebrating with a piece of cake today at your wedding if you've had cake every other day of that week? It's not special anymore. I'd never thought about that because I just had cake whenever I felt like it. And I never considered the meaning behind it and how it had lost its ability to help us celebrate really important lifetime decisions with one another in community. Recently, he said, when you are craving a Coke and you know you need to drink water instead, why can't you thank God for a cool glass of water? Because it's a gift too. I'm telling you, he's a special guy. Your brain was never meant to simply help you survive. It's the key to beginning to thrive. It was created to help you think wisely, love deeply, serve faithfully, and live the life God has called you to live. So take care of it. Steward it really well. Because when we care well for the gifts God has given us, then we're better equipped to become the people He created us to be. Remember, you're never stuck with the brain health you've got. It can always get better. That's a journey worth going on as we all aim for more.